I have the wonderful privilege to introduce our speaker of the day, Ms. Lucy Anderson. Ms. Lucy Anderson is an attorney, so sometimes you'll see ESQ behind her name. Today, she's wearing a hat that shows that she is a Certified Parliamentarian-Teacher, which is a credential awarded by the American Institute of Parliamentarians, or AIP, and a Professional Registered Parliamentarian, which is a credential of the National Association of Parliamentarians, NAP. Now, for NAP, she has served as a member of the Board of Directors and as chairman of the Bylaws and Standing Orders Committee. And for the NAP, she served as a member of the Board of Directors and president of the Texas State Association of Parliamentarians in 2010 to 2011. She has conducted numerous workshops and presentations and has mentored students in the study of parliamentary procedures for completion of parliamentary certification exams. So without further ado, I invite Ms. Lucy Anderson to the virtual stage.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I am so happy to have been invited to share this presentation with you this evening. It is my hope that at the end of the presentation, everybody will have no fears about presiding over a meeting and knowing exactly how to handle a primary motion to amend. Or even if you are not presiding over a meeting, if you are a member of the assembly, then I want you to feel comfortable in knowing exactly what is going on when you see a primary motion to amend being handled properly. We will also look at the motion, a secondary motion to amend, and also the motion to substitute. So I am going to get started right away. This is the outline. Now, some of this, when we get down to talking about the 3 amendment processes, we're going to get in the weeds a little bit, but don't worry about that. Just stick with me, because when we get to handling a primary amendment, when we get to improper amendments, this will be a little bit more exciting. So we do have some weeds to travel through first. And what I mean by that, they are some rules that are very particular. And so sometimes when you're looking at rules, it's not very exciting, but I want you to be exposed to them and know that they exist. I'm going to give you some references so that you can go back and read Roberts and further understand those rules. Yes, this is a Roberts presentation. In the middle here is the parliamentary authority that so many organizations use as their parliamentary authority. That's a 700 or 800 page book written on the collegiate level. The book on the left is written by the same authors as the one in the middle, the white parliamentary authority. The one on the left is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief, and I assume most people on the call have both of those books. But the one in brief will cover most of the situations that an ordinary society will encounter. The book on the right is the American Institute of Parliamentarians Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure, their 2nd edition. This book is a more simplified look at the rules of parliamentary procedure. A lot of dental associations, medical associations have this book as their parliamentary authority. It is was just completed and offered for sale in September. And the American Institute of Parliamentarians just completed. As a matter of fact, I just left Las Vegas this morning where there was a session to talk about all of the changes that have been placed into AIPSC 2. All right, so if depending on where you are, if you are a beginning parliamentarian, do pick up a copy of In Brief and read it. If you are a little bit more advanced and you're ready to move forward, pick up either one of these white books and start reading them. So to amend, what is the purpose of the motion to amend? The whole purpose of that motion to amend is to modify the wording of a main motion that's pending. The objective is to improve the main motion, to perfect the main motion. So sometimes motions are made and you're sitting in the assembly and you think that you could improve that motion if you just struck out a word and put in a different word, you added something on the end. And when you want to do that, then what you're wanting to do is to amend the motion. And sometimes you may amend this motion in such a way that it will actually change the meaning of the motion itself, but that's okay, as long as the amendment is a proper amendment to make. And we're going to see in a few minutes what sorts of things would be improper. All right, so a lot of times amendments are so simple that the presiding officer just knows that everybody in the assembly is in agreement that the particular amendment be made. And so rather than getting into the formal processes of amending a motion, the presiding officer will say, is there any objection to the amendment that was just proposed by the member? And if no one says anything, the presiding officer will say there is no objection and the main motion is amended. The main motion as amended now reads that the assembly do such and such. So the reason why I'm telling you that is because you can save a lot of time. If it appears that the whole assembly thinks that the amendment that the member just proposed was a good one, then there is no need to go into the formal processes of handling the amendment. The presiding officer can process that proposed amendment by using unanimous consent. That's what that procedure is called. Is there any objection to adopting the amendment? And then if there's no objection, then it would be adopted, using unanimous consent to process an amendment. Now, when a member proposes an amendment, of course, we have a main motion that's already pending, and a member of the assembly wants to propose an amendment. The person who wants to propose the amendment has to wait and get recognition, has to be granted the floor. It would not be in order to make an amendment while someone else has the floor. So that would be out of order. The person who wants to make the amendment has to wait and be recognized and make the amendment. And the amendment must be seconded. The amendment is debatable if the main motion is debatable, the proposed amendment would be debatable. And the amendment is also itself amendable. So if you have a main motion pending, you have an amendment pending, someone can make a motion to amend the amendment. And then that would be a secondary amendment. The first amendment we call a primary amendment, and then that second amendment would be a secondary amendment. Now, amendments to be adopted will require a majority vote, even in those cases where the motion to be amended would take a 2/3 vote. You know, when you propose, or let's say the bylaws committee comes to the assembly and proposes an amendment to the bylaws, most of the time in most organizations, and Robert says that you need a 2/3 vote and notice to adopt an amendment to the bylaws. Well, when the bylaws committee proposes that amendment to the bylaws, that is a main motion. And any amendments to that main motion would be a primary amendment, and that amendment would take a majority vote. But the main motion to amend the bylaws takes a 2/3 vote. So even when the motion to be amended takes a 2/3 vote, the amendment itself only takes a majority vote. And let's say that the amendment is adopted, well, and then later on in the meeting, you're still talking about that amendment, and someone can make the motion to reconsider the vote that was taken on that amendment. All right, now these are some things I'm wondering if you already know these things. That the amendment can take either one of these forms. You can have an amendment to change a word or a phrase, or you can have an amendment to substitute out the whole main motion. Or if it's a resolution, substitute out some of the resolving clauses. Or if it's a motion that is several paragraphs long, you can have a main motion to substitute out one or more of those paragraphs. And did you know that if you adopt, when you adopt an amendment, the main motion is then voted on in its amended form. In other words, you have a main motion, someone proposes an amendment to change a little something in the main motion, and that amendment is adopted. Then what you have remaining is a main motion as amended, and that main motion itself still needs to be voted on. And if you have a main motion pending, someone proposes an amendment to that main motion, and if that amendment is rejected, you're just still back to the main motion without any change to it, and it is still before the assembly to be debated and voted on. And if I vote a certain way on the amendment, I am not obligated to vote that same way on the main motion. I'm not obligated in any way to do that. And did you know that an amendment must also be germane? Now, I know a lot of you know this because I recognize your names, and I know that you have been studying parliamentary procedure for a while. So I should be able to get someone to answer this question for me. What does germane mean? Anyone? Germane. Just unmute it, tell me.
Closely related.
Relevant.
Relevant to the subjects that at hand.
Yes.
All right, that's right. It's relevant to the subject at hand. Thank you. I think that was Aretha. And I think
Yes,
I
ma'am.
also heard Bauman chiming in there. That's right. It means that it's closely related or having a bearing on the subject of the motion to be amended. That's what germane means. And an amendment to a motion needs to be germane. It must be related to the motion. Sometimes the presiding officer is not sure whether or not the amendment is germane. And I've seen this on several occasions where someone proposes an amendment and, you know, you could take it one way or you could take it another. I mean, it might be germane, it may not. But if the presiding officer is in doubt, the presiding officer should do one of two things. Go ahead and admit it as a proper amendment. And then, of course, you risk someone raising a point of order and claiming that it's not, and then making an appeal. But that's okay. You will finally get to where you want to be. It's going to be germane or not. So when the presiding officer is unsure whether or not the proposed amendment is germane, then the presiding officer should do one of two things. Admit the amendment, which I just talked about, or the presiding officer just right away can refer the decision to the assembly Is it in the Assembly's decision that the proposed amendment is germane? Those believing that the amendment is germane, say aye. Those thinking that it is not germane, say no. So you ask the Assembly to decide whether or not the amendment is germane. When you have something that was previously adopted, and we talked about this just a minute ago, like the bylaws, then a proposed, it's not the subsidiary motion to amend. That motion is coming from the Bylaws Committee to amend Article 3, Section 2 by striking number 1. That in itself is a main motion. All right, so we're going to get down to some very specific things now. There are 3 basic processes of amendment.
May I interrupt you for just one moment before you?
Yes, I think that's
Let me
Penelope.
please- Yes, it's Penelope here. 2 things. One, if any of you have questions, please put them in the chat, and she will be able to take them as she goes along. And also, because some of you were not here when the announcement was made, if you are seeking your CEUs for this evening's presentation, you must have your camera on, and you must provide me with your email address, member number, and designation, RP or PRP. You may put that information in the chat directly to Penelope. Thank you. And I don't see any questions at the moment.
All right, thank you.
Turn your cameras on, everyone.
All right, now I was just saying that there are 3 basic processes of amendment, and they're right there in the middle of your screen. You can propose an amendment to insert or add. And when you add, just think about adding, you're adding something onto the end of the motion. So, and if you're inserting, it's going somewhere in between the words of what you're wanting to amend. So that's the first process. You can either insert or add. The second process would be you're wanting to amend by striking something out. And then the third process would be that a person in the Assembly wants to strike something out and insert.
Yeah.
All in one fell swoop, strike out and insert, one motion. Or someone might want to amend by substituting. And they can, and we're going to see this in a little bit later. I move to substitute XYZ for the pending motion. All right, so, and each one of these 3 has 2 forms. So we're going to talk about that. One of the 2 forms that you can think about when you're inserting or adding is you may be inserting just a few words or a word or 2. That's the first form that is applicable to number 1. Or you might be inserting or adding a whole paragraph. That could be the second form of number 1. The same for number 2. I might want to strike out a word or 2, a few words, or I might want to strike out a whole paragraph or section. And then the same 2 forms for the third basic process. I might want to strike out and insert a few words, or strike out and insert a whole paragraph, or substitute a few words. I mean, substitute applies to a whole main motion or a paragraph. Okay, so we are going to look at the processes of amendment and each of those 2 forms that I told you about for each of the 3 processes. And matter of fact, I've just told you about them on the previous slide. But the first of the 3 processes, remember, was to insert or to add. And so you can insert words or add words. And when you add, remember, they're going to be placed at the end of the sentence. Or you might want to insert a paragraph or add a paragraph at the end. And then the same two forms for the second process. And all of this you can find at section 12.8. Okay, the third process, the strikeout and insert. Remember, this was one fell swoop, or to substitute. And the same thing goes. You're going to strike out a paragraph or an entire text of a resolution, an entire main motion, and put in its place another paragraph or another entire main motion. And when you say substitute, that is a technical parliamentary term. It's not applied to anything less than a complete paragraph of one or more sentences, so that this term is not applicable to Form 3A. Form 3A is talking purely about words or a word. But when you're talking about substitute, you're talking about a complete paragraph or a group of sentences or a whole main motion. All right, now we're going to look a little bit more in depth on that first process, motion to insert or add words. So when if you do make a motion to insert or add words, you need to say, while you're making the motion, where these words are going to go that you want to insert or add. So what you see here on the screen is the instruction. You need to specify the exact place of insertion by naming the word before or after which, or the words between which the insertion is to be made, whichever one will better locate and point out what the change is that you're trying to make. And I've got an example there. So you have a pending main motion. I move that the society buy a computer. All right. And someone in the assembly wants to make an amendment. They want it to be a Dell computer. So when they propose their amendment, they need to say exactly where the word Dell is supposed to go in the amendment. I move to insert Dell before computer, and then someone else second. But the whole point is of this slide is when you're making the motion, you need to say in the proposed amendment where the insertion or the addition should be. Now we can say before computer, or we can say after A, or you can say I move to insert Dell between A and computer. So that's the whole point there. All right, so here is an interesting situation here. After words have been inserted or added, they cannot be changed, and they cannot be struck out during the same session except by certain ways, through a consideration of the vote, which means that you want to reconsider or rethink what you just did when you inserted or added those words. And usually this has to be after some progress in debate. Some time needs to pass during the meeting before you're able to make this motion to reconsider. So what are we saying here? After you have kind of fiddled with some words, adding them or striking them out or whatever, you cannot go back and do something else with those words except through another motion to reconsider what you did, or through an amendment that would present a whole new question in the form of a motion. And there are several forms that this whole new motion can take. But this whole prohibition against revisiting those words that you changed up with your amendment, that whole thing is called the settled rule. And you can read about that in Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised in brief, the 3rd edition. All right, so I said that after you have kind of twinkled with those words, you can't bother with them again except through reconsidering the vote or through an amendment that's going to present a new question in the form of a motion. And we're going to go through several examples of that. Like you can do a motion to strike out the entire paragraph where you put those new words. That's another way you can get rid of those new words. You can strike out a portion of the paragraph, including all or a part of the words that were inserted, or enough words to make a different question. Or you can substitute an entire paragraph for the one in which those words were put in, those new words. Or you can strike out a portion of the paragraph, including all or a part of those words that were inserted, and insert other words in a way that would make a new motion. All right, so that's getting in the weeds a little bit, and I told you that we would do that. But these are some of the restrictions that are placed on amending. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see 1229. So that's the reference. I don't have this in the right format that Roberts has suggested we use for citing, but I'm just using this abbreviated form and you'll know what I mean here. If you want to read about the things that are on this slide, go to 1229. All right, so let's continue on here. We're getting closer and closer to the exciting part of my presentation. So just stick with me while we get through this tedious section here. Okay, now if a motion to insert certain words in a particular place is voted down, it's still in order to make a motion to insert only a part of those words somewhere, or to insert all or a part of the same words together with others. You can still do that. So what I'm saying, if you have a motion to insert words and your motion to amend by inserting words didn't pass, it was voted down, you still can have a motion to insert a part of the same words in that place, or insert all or a part of same words together with other words, or you can have a motion to insert the same words in place of others, a motion to strike out and insert, or a motion to insert the same words in a different place. Okay, go to 1229, think about this, read it for yourselves. Okay, so now we're going to talk about that process 1B. Remember, 1A was you're going to insert or add words. 1B was insert or adding a paragraph. And those rules are essentially the same as those that we just went over for inserting or adding words. But after a paragraph has been inserted, words can still be added to it. And this is the same for a substitute. If you have had an amendment to substitute one motion for another motion, and that amendment passed such that now you have as your main motion the substitute, you can only amend that by adding on the end of it. Okay, and this, remember this. If a motion to insert or add a paragraph is voted down, that does not preclude you from putting that paragraph in somewhere else. Its rejection does not preclude any other motion except that presents essentially the same question. Okay, now we're going to 2A. If a motion to strike out certain words is adopted, you've had a motion to strike out some words. If that was adopted, those same words cannot be asserted again during the same session unless the place or the wording is so changed as to make a new proposition. All right, we're on 2A now, striking out words. If a motion to strike out certain words fails, it's still in order to have a motion to strike out only a part of those words, or to strike out all or a part of the same words together with others, or to strike out all or a part of the same words and insert different ones, or to strike out all or a part of the same words together with some others and insert different words. So these are pretty much kind of the rules that we saw for process 1. Here's another rule. The motion to amend by striking out certain words can be amended only by striking out words from the primary amendment. And I'm going to have an example of this for you. The effect of such a secondary amendment is the words that are struck out of the primary amendment means that they stay in the main motion. And I'm going to have an example, and this is it. So what we're saying here, let me just repeat this. If you have a motion and it is pending, like the one that is here on the screen, that the Secretary write to Congressman Altman, Brock, Crowley, Davidson, and Edwards. That's the main motion. And somebody is thinking to themselves, well, I don't think we should write to Brock, Crowley, and Davidson. So this person in the assembly says, I move to amend the main motion by striking out Brock, Crowley, and Davidson. That person who made that motion to amend is a primary amendment. They don't want the Secretary to write to Brock, Crowley, and Davidson. But you've got another person sitting in the assembly, and they say, well, I think we should write to Crowley. So that person can make a secondary amendment to strike Crowley from the primary amendment. And guess what? Crowley would remain in the main motion. So that was what this was saying. The motion to amend by striking out certain words can be amended only by striking out from the primary amendment, and the effect of striking out words from the primary amendment is that the words struck out of the primary amendment will remain in the main motion. All right, so let's say we had the main motion pending, we had the primary amendment pending to strike out Brock, Crowley, and Davidson. We had the secondary amendment pending to strike out Crowley. So the secondary amendment is adopted. So now the primary amendment, look in the middle of the screen, since the secondary amendment was adopted, which struck out Crowley, the primary amendment is going to become to strike out Brock and Davidson from the main motion. And notice, Crowley's name will remain in the main motion regardless of the outcome of the vote on the primary amendment. It doesn't affect him anymore, Crowley. So a primary amendment to strike out a single word cannot be amended. So if I have the main motion as stated on the screen, that the Secretary write to Congressman Altman, Brock, Crowley, Davidson, and Edwards, and if there is a primary amendment to strike out Altman and only Altman, you can't have a secondary amendment when the primary amendment is only to strike out a single word. Okay, we're almost to the exciting part. When a resolution has a preamble, the preamble is not open to amendment until after the amendment of the resolving clauses. So when you have a preamble, you're going to amend the resolving clauses first. The presiding officer, well, first of all, a member is going to propose a resolution. That is a more formal and a specifically structured main motion, a motion. And then it has several parts, and one of the parts is called resolving clauses. And you know what they are. Resolve that the organization do X, resolve that the organization do Y. So those resolving clauses are open to amendment first. And after they are amended and perfected, then the presiding officer will open up the preamble for amendment. What's the preamble? Anyone? How does the preamble begin? All right, parliamentarians. Just unmute and tell me how the preamble starts off.
Whereas.
There we go. Yes. Starts off whereas. That is exactly right. So after the resolving clauses are perfected, amended and perfected, the amendment is, the preamble is amended and perfected, then there is one single vote on adopting the entire resolution. All right, now remember, I told you that we would talk about improper amendments. And by the way, if there are any members on the call or any guests on the call who would be thinking about taking some sort of parliamentary exam, this is very testable, very testable. What are some improper amendments? Can someone give me one and somebody else give me another? Anyone? One improper amendment?
Negative one. Do not do this.
Say that again.
Negative motion that
Yes. Okay, thank you. Yes, a motion that is put in the negative. Anyone else? All right, let's go through a few. I think that was Bauman. Thank you for that. An amendment that's not germane. That would be improper, right? Yes. How about one that merely makes the adoption of the amended question equivalent to a rejection of the main motion? I mean, why make an amendment to the main, why propose an amendment to the main motion when only thing I have to do is just not adopt the main motion, and that's equivalent to your amendment? Here's an example: that our delegates be instructed to vote in favor of the increase in federation dues. And someone else wants to propose an amendment to insert not before B. And that amendment would make the main motion that our delegates not be instructed to vote in favor of the increase in the federation. So this primary amendment can be affected just by not adopting the main motion. So the primary amendment is not in order because an affirmative vote on the primary amendment is the exact same thing as a negative vote on the main motion. So a proposed amendment that merely makes the adoption of the amended question equivalent to a rejection of the original main motion is not in order. Here is another improper amendment, one that would cause the question or the motion as amended to not be in order. Let's say this was the main motion that was amended, and this is what resulted: that non-member John Doe be authorized to collect dues, members' dues. Well, we know most organizations, you have your bonded treasurer or financial secretary by rule are the ones who collect dues, right? So this would be improper in most instances for most organizations. Here's another improper amendment, one that proposes to change one of the forms of amendment listed in 12A into another form. And we just went over those forms of amendment. So here's an example. To purchase, the main motion is to purchase oak furniture for the entry hall. And someone proposes a primary amendment to strike out oak before furniture. And somebody else makes a secondary amendment. It's okay to make secondary amendments to add and insert maple. So they want the primary amendment to be to strike out oak before furniture and insert maple. So they want to strike out oak and insert maple, but that's a strikeout and insert. But the primary amendment is only a strike out. So you can't have a primary amendment to change the form of you can't have a secondary amendment which proposes to change the form of the primary amendment. Okay, so this was an attempt to change a strikeout to a strikeout and insert. Now we have two more improper amendments that I want to talk about. One that would have the effect of converting one parliamentary motion into another. Let's look at this one. We have a motion to postpone the question until 2 p.m. You can't amend that by striking out until 2 p.m. and inserting indefinitely, because then you're trying to make that a what kind of motion? Anyone?
Postpone indefinitely.
Thank you. That's exactly right. Because this would convert the motion into a different kind of motion. It's an attempt to convert postpone definitely into postpone indefinitely. Those are two different parliamentary motions. And an amendment that would strike out resolved from the resolve clauses, that is an improper amendment. All right, so now we get down to some fun. How to handle, how should the presiding officer handle a primary amendment? And I am sure that most of us on this Zoom call have been in meetings where you have seen a primary amendment being proposed or an amendment being proposed, and it just got all mixed up and convoluted because people didn't know what was pending. They didn't know what even it was meant by amending and what would result. So that's probably because the presiding officer did not make the situation clear at each portion, all during the meeting, all while those motions are pending. The presiding officer should make it very clear what is pending. So let's look at this example. We have a pending main motion, and that is that the club donate $500 to the food bank. Member A, who has already been recognized, says, I move to amend the motion by striking $500 and inserting $1,000. And member B says, second. And so now we see here that member A has proposed an amendment to strike and insert. So the presiding officer needs to do three things. And if she does or he does these three things, the assembly is going to be so satisfied. They are going to know exactly what the parliamentary situation is. They're going to know exactly what's before them, so they will know how to debate properly. When it's time to vote, they are going to know exactly what they're voting on and the consequences of their vote. So after the primary motion has been proposed and the presiding officer, it's now time for the presiding officer to state the motion to the assembly, but that's done in three parts. First, and you see the numbers over here, 1, 2, 3. First, the presiding officer is going to just state the question on the amendment. It is moved and seconded to amend the motion. Okay, and the second thing, the presiding officer has to say, what if the motion is amended? What would the main motion be if that amendment was adopted? So the presiding officer is going to say, if the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that the main motion will read that the club donate $1,000 to the food bank. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is the presiding officer has to now put the amendment before the assembly and make it clear that it is the amendment that is pending. The question is on the amendment to strike $500 and insert $1,000. Are you ready for the question? Or is there any debate? Either one of those two statements can be made. So let me review this again. The proposed amendment is to I move to amend the motion by striking $500 and inserting $1,000. Second, it is moved and seconded to amend the motion by striking $500 and inserting $1,000. Number two, if the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that the club donate $1,000 to the food bank. Number three, the question is on the amendment to strike $500 and insert $1,000. Are you ready for the question? All right. Is there any debate? Same thing. And so members, they know what they're debating on, so they start debating. And so then the presiding officer is going, everybody's quiet. Is there any further debate? And nobody says anything. And so the presiding officer is going to do these three things over again. The question is on the amendment to strike $500 and insert $1,000. Number two, if the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that the club donate $1,000 to the food bank. The question is on the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment to strike $500 and insert $1,000 say aye. Those opposed to striking 500 and inserting 1,000 say no. And then the presiding officer knows what the vote is now. And here again, this number three, there's a three-part announcement. The presiding officer has to say which side has it, either the ayes or the noes. The presiding officer has to say whether or not the amendment was adopted or lost and what the effect is. The ayes have it, the amendment is adopted, and the main motion now reads that the club donate $1,000 to the food bank. Is there any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Okay, any question on that? Penelope, in the chat, any questions?
I'm not seeing questions in the chat, but people should also feel free to raise their virtual hand.
Okay, well, we
Is-
are going to go right along, and I am going to ask how much time I have remaining.
What time is it? You can have easily another half hour.
Okay, and we probably won't need that, but let's kind of have some demonstration of this. So the chair, in these demonstrations, if presiding officer, we're going to need one. We're going to need a parliamentarian, and we need a member to make the motion to amend, and we need a member to second the motion. All right, so and chair, presiding officer, if you need a hint, just ask for a hint and I'll get you one. Presiding officer, you're supposed to, parliamentarian, you're supposed to whisper, but or text the presiding officer if you're on Zoom, or maybe you've got an open telephone line if you're on an electronic meeting. But let's not worry about all of that being quiet as a parliamentarian right now. You can just go ahead and say out loud if you have any suggestion for the presiding officer as they move through handling this amendment. Now, members, do seek the floor when it's your time to speak. Do seek recognition so that the presiding officer can recognize you to speak. And members, as you make motions, remember it's I move that or I move to. That's the proper language. I move to or I move that. Presiding officer, when you are stating the question, is it is moved and seconded. It is moved and seconded. All right, there's kind of no variation in that. So that's the terminology. All right, so here we have a pending motion that the club plant a tree. That the club plant, that motion is pending. And we need a member A, we need a member B, and member A, you have some debate. And so we need a presiding officer. Any volunteers?
Yeah, I think you just got Millie. Did I see you raising your hand? Yes, Millie Anderson has volunteered.
Okay, so Millie, you're gonna be the chair for us? Go ahead and unmute. Millie,
She's still not unmuted.
okay,
She's working on it.
all right. Well, while Millie is working on that, I need a member A. Do I have a volunteer? Do I have a volunteer for member A? And Penelope, if you will be
Here,
member B.
Tan has volunteered for member A.
Okay, thank you, Tan. And Penelope, if you will
Yes.
be our seconder. Okay, all right. Remember, seek recognition, right? And remember that, Millie, it is moved and seconded. Remember that language? Okay,
Mhm.
all right. Here we go, member A, and I believe that is Tan.
I move to amend the motion by,
I'm going to stop you right there.
okay, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Millie, are you serving as our chair?
Yes,
She's seeking recognition.
okay, I'm sorry, I see that. Okay, the chair recognizes member A.
I move to amend the motion by inserting maple before tree.
Second,
It has been moved and seconded to amend this motion by inserting what word before maple? I'm sorry, didn't hear the whole thing.
It's on the screen.
Oh, by inserting maple before tree, okay. It has been moved and seconded to amend the motion by inserting maple before tree.
All right, the second thing, that's number one, your second thing that the chair has to do.
Okay, no.
Okay, I'm gonna give you a little
Would you
hint.
ask for a discussion or debate?
All right, I'm gonna give you a
One,
little
two, three.
guidance here.
Okay, if the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that the club plant a maple tree. The question is on the amendment to plant a maple tree. Are you ready for the question?
All right, the amendment is what? The question's on the amendment to do what?
The question is on the amendment to insert maple before tree. Are you ready for the question? I'm sorry, I have laryngitis. Are you ready for the question? The chair recognizes member A.
Are you still with us, Tan?
I am, I guess I'm lost. Let me see. Remember, a maple is the number of favorite in this community. We would need approval from the HOA to plant any other type of tree.
Okay, now I'm lost. I know I'm supposed to say something, but didn't she say more than was really required?
Her script was written there for her, so she just read what was
Oh,
there.
okay. Okay,
So you're wanting to know, does anybody else want to speak?
right, okay. Is there anyone else who would like the floor?
That's right. Is there any further debate? Yeah, okay.
I don't see any hands or anything, so.
Okay.
The floor recognizes Penelope. And the chair recognizes Penelope.
All right, and we're gonna go by the script. We're not gonna add anything. Penelope, but did you have a question?
no, I thought you wanted a debate. I was going to
Okay,
say how
yes.
ugly I thought maple trees were, even if it's required in the community.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Millie.
Okay, I don't see anyone else looking to be recognized. I only see 3 other people, but nobody else is raising a hand to be recognized.
You are correct. Go ahead.
Okay, if there is no further discussion, are you ready for the question? The question on the amendment is to if A is adopted, the main motion will.
Okay, the question is on the amendment to, and you need to fill that in.
Okay, the question is on the amendment to insert the word maple before tree. So if A is adopted, so if that A meaning if the word maple, if the
A means amendment and MM means main motion.
no, main motion I got, but A means adopted or A means,
A means amendment.
okay, if the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that we will, where's the original?
It's main motion is at the top.
Plant a maple tree,
Okay.
okay. Wait a minute, if A is adopted, the main motion, the question is on the amendment to insert the word maple before tree. My script is covered here with the pictures of the people, I'm sorry. Those in favor of inserting maple before tree, say aye.
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 Okay, those opposed to inserting maple before tree, say no.
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 No, okay. It sounds like the noes have it. And the amendment is lost, which means we will not insert the word maple before tree.
Okay, and we're back to the main motion that the club plant a tree. Very good, very good. Okay, so the thing that I wanted you to see here is that when someone proposes an amendment, the presiding officer does these three things. Says it is moved and seconded to amend the motion by whatever that proposed amendment was, and then say how the main motion would read if the amendment is adopted, but then go back to the amendment. The question is on the amendment to insert maple before tree. Are you ready for the question, or is there any discussion? And then after discussion, after all of the debate, when the presiding officer is that's called putting the question before a vote, presiding officer has to go back through those three steps again. And by doing that, it just really makes the assembly so informed. They're not confused. They know what's going on. And you don't get that situation that occurs when people are proposing amendments and they or get confused in meetings because they don't know where we are. Are we voting on the amendment or are we voting on the main motion? I don't know what's going on. And sometimes they even get out in the parking lot and still don't know what they just did. All right. Thank you so much, Millie. Appreciate that. Thank you, Tan. Thank you, Penelope. Let's do one more. Do I have a chair? I have a brave chair who's wanting to try this out.
Don't ask me why, but I'll try.
Okay. Who is going to try for us?
Deborah Burt.
Oh, thank you, Deborah. All right. Millie, will you be member A?
Sure.
You will be making the motion. Don't forget to seek recognition. And then Deborah, don't forget to say it is moved and seconded. That's the way you state the question in Roberts. There's some other parliamentary authorities that have some other words, but in Roberts, it is moved and seconded. Okay, Penelope, you're going to second again, member B?
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Millie, I believe, first, the pending motion is that the club donate to the Red Cross. That's the main motion. It is already pending. And so, Deborah, you're wanting, no, who's Millie?
I'm the chair.
Okay, Millie, you're wanting to seek recognition to speak. You can go ahead and start, Millie. You can address the chair.
Recognize me, I'm sorry. Okay, I second.
Oh, you want to say Madam Chair? Because you want
Madam Chair. Okay.
Chair recognizes Millie Anderson.
I second.
All right,
Thank
you're
you.
making the motion this time, Millie. You're member A.
Oh, it's already been said. I'm sorry. Okay.
You're making the motion, the
No.
motion to amend. You're making the
Okay.
motion to
I
amend.
move to amend the motion by inserting $500 after donate.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded.
Now, I want to stop you there.
Okay.
What is the way that the presiding officer is going to state the motion? It is moved and seconded. It is moved and seconded.
Did I say that? Did you hear me say that?
No, you said it has been moved.
Okay. Let
All
me
right.
do it again.
Okay, there we go.
It is moved and seconded that we amend the main motion by inserting 500 after donate. Once the motion, if the motion is amended, it would read that it would be a motion that the club donate $500 to the Red Cross. Is there any discussion or debate
On what? What are we debating on?
on the amendment to the main motion?
Millie, you want to seek recognition because you want you want to debate. You have to address the chair.
Madam Chair,
Yes, the chair recognizes you, Ms. Millie.
thank you. Okay,
Your debate is right in the middle of the screen.
okay. We should specify how much money, but it already says $500. We should specify how much money to donate. Or am I
Okay.
not in the right place?
You're
And
in the
I'm
right
mixed up.
place. You're just saying why you want $500 there because we need to
Okay.
see how much.
Okay,
You're debating. You're convincing the assembly.
okay. $500 may sound like a lot of money, but for the Red Cross, it's a reasonable amount with all the expenses they have.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right.
Is there any further discussion? Is there a call for the question of the amendment to the main motion of adding $500, inserting $500 after donate? And the amended motion would read that the club donate $500 to the Red Cross, and we're going to be voting on the amendment to the main motion. Is anyone ready for the question? You can correct me anytime. It doesn't
Okay.
bother me.
All right. You can go ahead and just say those in favor because
Okay.
yeah.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please indicate by saying no.
no,
It sounds as if the ayes have it. Therefore, the main motion has been amended. And now we need to vote on the newly amended main motion.
Okay. All right. One thing here.
Okay,
After the amendment is adopted, you have the main motion as amended,
Okay.
and people can still debate. Debate is not closed on that yet. They still can debate on the main motion as amended. Very good, very good. All
I
right.
tried.
All right, so Penelope?
am I correct though that if I understood you, and I may not have, that I could not now move to amend the main motion by striking 500 and inserting $1,000?
That is correct, because you've already fiddled with that 500 and in that place in motion. You have to, after some progress, I mean, let's say you debated the amended main motion, and you have just gone on and debate has continued and you've gotten around to you've got more information. The parliamentary situation has changed. You know more, things have changed. You know more information. And so you may want to make the motion to reconsider the vote on $500. And once, if people adopt the motion to reconsider, then you're right back at discussing whether or not to insert the $500. All right. We are going to go on now to look at secondary amendments. And I don't know if we'll have time to practice, but I want to tell you that making a motion, making a secondary amendment and processing it, it is very much the same as the way we handled the primary amendment. In the secondary amendment, if you can look on this screen here, it says we have a main motion that the invitation list include past presidents, and someone proposed an amendment to amend the main motion by adding and past graduate advisors. And so someone else wants to make a secondary amendment to amend the amendment by inserting active after and, such that the primary amendment would read active and active past graduate advisors. If adopted, the primary amendment would read and active past graduate advisors. Is there the question is on the secondary amendment to insert active. Is there any debate? So here, you're not going all the way back to what the main motion would read. You just only stopping at what the primary amendment would read. So in our examples and in our scripts that we just did, we said we had a primary amendment and we had a main motion, and the presiding officers stated the primary amendment, and they said how the main motion would read. Here, with the secondary amendment, we're going to state the secondary amendment and state how the primary amendment would read. And we go just to that level, that we don't go all the way back to the main motion. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Let's see. So it is moved and seconded to amend the amendment by inserting active after and. If the secondary amendment is adopted, the primary amendment will read amend the main motion by adding an active graduate advisors. The question is on the secondary amendment to insert active after and. Are you ready for the question, or is there any further debate? And so then when you have debate, you can when you have debate, you would those same three, in putting the question, you ready for the vote? There's no more debate. The chair says, is there further debate? And pauses, there's no further debate. The question is on the secondary amendment to insert active after and. If the secondary amendment is adopted, the primary amendment will read amend the main motion by adding an active past graduate advisors. The question is on the secondary amendment. Those that are in favor of inserting active after and, say aye. Yeah, and so that's the way that goes. You don't go all the way back to the main motion in these three things that the chair is going to say. You only go back to the primary amendment. That's when you have a secondary amendment.
That gets very confusing.
Well, I thought that it's exactly the same as the primary, because you're not going all the way back to the main motion. You're just doing the same thing that you did when you process the primary amendment.
And is it true that and that's as far as it can go, right?
For your secondary amendment, yes.
And if the secondary amendment passed and the primary amendment passed, we could still be debating on the original motion and add add all junior award winners or something, add some other phrases or add other people.
That is correct. Yes,
After you've
absolutely.
gone all the way back, though.
Well, you could actually amend the primary amendment. Let's say the secondary amendment is adopted. And so the primary amendment now reads to amend the main motion by adding an active past graduate advisors. Is there any discussion on the primary amendment?
I move to insert and their husbands after the word advisors.
Yeah, you could do that. You could, on the end, you could do that. Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so I am going to, do you all, I'm going to give you, let's see, do I have the reference for this? On the substitute, let me just tell you how, let me just give you the overview of the process for substitute. If you have a motion to substitute, and this example, we have the main motion is to lease the house on Gum Street. That's the main motion. And someone proposes a substitute. I move to propose to buy the farmhouse on Highway 15. I move that we substitute to buy the farmhouse on Highway 15 for the pending main motion. Right. So we have the main motion and someone just proposed a substitute. And somebody says second. The presiding officer is going to repeat that. It is moved and seconded to substitute to buy the farmhouse on Highway 15 as a substitute for the pending main motion. And the presiding officer will then say, we are going to amend both the main motion and the substitute. I will open the floor for amending the main motion first. So then if there are any amendments to the main motion, people in the assembly will propose amendments and vote on those. And then after they are finished perfecting the main motion, then they will perfect the substitute. Presiding officer, are there any further amendments to the main on the main motion? And then the presiding officers will say, are there any amendments on the substitute? And the presiding officer will take amendments to the substitute. And then the presiding officer will say, are there any further amendments to either the main motion or the substitute? And then the presiding officer is going to read the main motion as amended and read the proposed substitute as amended. And then the presiding officer will say, shall the last read proposal be substituted for the pending main motion? And if they vote, those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. And if the ayes have it, then what you have now is the substitute in place of the main motion. And if it's voted down, when the presiding officer says, shall the last read proposal be substituted for the pending main motion? If the noes get it, then what you have pending still is the main motion before the substitute was made. So that's kind of the process there. And Penelope, I saw your hand.
Yes, how is that germane to the main
That's what I
motion?
was going to ask.
The main
How does this substitute, where does germane come into play?
It
Because
has
these
to be,
are like two totally different things.
it has to be germane. In this case, the germaneness would be that you're trying to find a place to live. So you can lease the house on Gum Street or you can buy the farmhouse on Highway 15. In my opinion, that is germane. However, someone might feel that it's not germane. They could raise a point of order. Even if the presiding officer, him or herself, thought it was not germane, then they could put it to the assembly for vote. But you're correct, it does have to be germane. Okay, and Eva.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. I'm kind of curious about substitution. how far do you go with the main motion? If are you amending anything in the main motion? Because you said you want to make it, you want to have input in the main motion to have it right the way you want to word it. Now, if you're working on the main motion, are you making amendments to that main motion?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, and then after, how far do you go to make amendments on the main motion before you go to make amendments on the substitute?
When
amendment?
nobody else wants to make any propose any amendments to the main motion, you just get all the you just perfect the main motion as best you can. Some of the proposed amendments are going to pass, some are not. But when nobody else wants to propose an amendment to the main motion, then they propose amendments to the substitute. And then after they finish perfecting the substitute, presiding officer is going to say, are there any further amendments to either the main motion or the substitute? And if there are no further amendments, if there are, then those amendments can be proposed and voted on. And if there are not, then the presiding officer is going to read the main motion as amended and read the proposed substitute as amended. And then she will permit them to vote on the substitute. And if it's adopted, then you got the substitute in for the main motion. If it's not adopted, you're back to the main motion as it's been perfected as the resulting main motion to be further debated and voted on.
Okay, so can I just get a small clarification? So when you're amending the main motion, you're amending it and you're voting on the amendment on the main motion?
Yes.
While you're perfecting it. Okay.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
that is correct. You're voting, those proposed amendments are voted on, and you're making it perfect, so to speak. And then after you finish perfecting the main motion with all those amendments, then you go to the substitute and propose amendments and vote on all those.
So you're kind of offering the membership two choices, either this choice or this choice. Is that the way it's working?
That is correct.
Okay.
And then they will vote on the substitute after they're finished perfecting both the main motion and the substitute. Then they will vote on the substitute first. They will vote on it. The perfected substitute.
Now,
all right.
Sorry, okay, because you're opening up a lot of questions. Why then, if you have the main amendment, could you not substitute lease for buy instead of offering the substitute? If you said to lease a farmhouse, substitute lease for buy, and then substitute
But those are all
on the street.
Those are all sorts of things that will be handled in the perfection of the main motion and in the perfection of the substitute. You're right. Somebody might want to say, I move to amend the substitute by striking by and insert lease. So those are all the sorts of things that will happen when you're perfecting the main motion and you're perfecting the substitute. And they won't all pass, of course, but the assembly will vote yes or no on, or aye or no on what they want to approve. Penelope, I have completed my presentation. I want to thank the members and the guests for their attention and participation. I really appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me.